Preparing to live stream. Done.
And we're live. That's
Okay.
it. Okay, so March 1st, we're a few minutes late, just having some technical difficulties. Welcome to our weekly meetup. I'm so glad everybody could come. And yeah, here we are. Welcome to our meetup. I'm going to try and follow the slides. The agenda this today is jam-packed. We have update from the videos. We have an event coming up. Cardano Spot's going to give us a little piece of information, I hope, about Twitter Space. If Cole's here, we're going to have an intro to a database model, and then we have some budget information, followed by Lawrence and smart contracts, easy way. Really looking forward to that. So C4C in 2023, this is over to you, please, Peter.
Thank you, Melanie. So let me move a few slides forward, and we will start with actually diving into the past a little bit, back to November 2022. That's when Cardano4Climate held a workshop at the Cardano Summit in Switzerland. And that's where 12 projects were introduced, and we will showcase 3 of them today. So let's start right away with Impact Scope.
We're talking about opportunities for impact on Cardano, and one of the most fascinating tools for tracking and displaying impact on Cardano are dynamic proof of impact NFTs. Without wanting to get too technical, the new meta standards introduced by Cardano Improvement Proposal 0068 and 67 now make it much easier to connect dynamic NFTs with off-chain real-world oracles to basically channel increases in impact data and display them in the form of dynamic NFTs over time.
So these short videos should work as a sort of introduction to the project. And if you're interested in Impact Scope, you can find more about them on this slide on the bottom right. You can learn everything. Let's move to the next project, which are our very good friends from Sustainable ADA.
We work to connect the dots between blockchain, sustainable development, and Cardano. And we're highlighting stories and use cases of projects building in the ecosystem with boots on the ground and trying to spread the word on how this stuff can actually make a difference. We also are inspiring hope through action.
Talking about inspiring hope through action, put your hands up if you feel like you want to make the world a better place. Right. Hands up if you know about all the opportunities in Cardano to do that and are doing that. Right? And this is where we're trying to I'm really honored to share the room with such inspiring people here and talking about connecting the dots. So I have a background as a teacher. I used to teach geography, history, politics and economics in the UK, in France and Indonesia. And one thing I've noticed, and perhaps you've heard about the latest study from UNESCO, over 70% of national curriculums do not talk about climate change, climate justice, social justice. 17,000 youth in a recent poll have said they want to see that in their classrooms. Over 90% of teachers don't know how to teach that to their youth. So we have a problem, right? So I left the classroom and I met Cole, and we have been supported by this wonderful community with the world's largest decentralized innovation fund called Project Catalyst. And we've been looking at this ecosystem. So here are just a few examples of the research we've carried out, talking about impact. And that's been a common theme in this summit, impact. What is impact? We need to talk about that.
And as you can see, there's a lot of impact in the Cardano ecosystem, hard to visualize that impact, and it's hard to really see that impact. So something that we're doing is creating the Cardano Impact Report. It will be a yearly report focused on all the impact organizations and projects and the good that's happening in this ecosystem.
There's a lot of things Sustainable ADA is doing. So again, if you want to learn more, feel free to follow this link. And the last project for today is Satellite Oracle.
This idea is not new, to use satellite imagery and environmental data to measure environmental impact of a variety of projects. However, collecting and processing this data is very, very complex. There are a variety of satellite imaging systems out there flying around the Earth, but getting this data, processing this data, systematizing this data is a big challenge.
Yes, so just a very quick short video. Okay, more information about Satellite Oracle below on the slide. If you'd like to watch all of these videos, you can subscribe to our Linktree to receive notifications. There are also my Twitter and LinkedIn profiles where I'm sharing all these videos. We have altogether 14 videos now. And everything's also on the website adafilms.art/C4C, which sort of work like an archive. And I'm using these words from Lawrence from last week. I really enjoyed that it's sort of an archive where we can find like a gallery of all the videos on one place, and you can browse it through as you wish. So with that, back to Melanie, I think, or to Yoram, I'm not sure.
Off to Yoram.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So it's always incredible to see these inspiring projects and many more. So really incredible. Thank you for that, and thank you for what you are doing. So another initiative we are starting, and we are happy to share with you, is we feel there's so much impact happening on the Cardano ecosystem, right, by the different organization, and we kind of initiating to have a monthly update meetup on the fourth week of every month at 8 p.m. UTC on a Thursday. And the idea is really to bring all the impact community together, projects, companies working on Cardano, IOG, CEF, Imargo, and each one to give a few minutes presentation, share what happened last month, what's their plan for the coming months, and then with links, if people want to read more, they can go to links and read more. But the idea is to connect, to bring together people, to collaborate. Yeah, so that's really starting. The first one is 24, I think, of March, not 28. But if I'm not mistaken here, but we will verify that. And already Peter and Daniel are kind of supporting that, and we'll kind of we'll form a group to work on that. So whoever wants to join and work on this monthly meetup, really, I think it's going to be a really exciting one. Yeah, so that's kind of another project we're initiating. Yeah, I don't know if any questions or anything to add on that, Melanie.
I have March 28th, but we'll check the date. I believe it is the 28th. I did get that out of the Zoom. I will share the links to the meetup in the chat. We are a little bit short for time. I hate to rush anybody, but we're off to Miguel next, and then Cole. Peter, you can stop sharing until after Cole is done, and then away we go.
Perfect.
Miguel,
So
you're up. Yep.
Yes, so like our conversation yesterday, I would like to invite everyone in C4C to join me and Cole and Raz discuss a weekly Twitter space with pretty much specific themes around the C4C ecosystem. which we can discuss further separately one-on-one with certain projects, or we can group certain project categories together so that we can explain like how this Twitter space will happen starting uh the week of the 27th onwards.
Nice. Nice. Thank you, Miguel. So we just got kind of a little piece of information about that. Looking forward to what's happening. This is so cool that people are jumping in. Shaw just offered to help, I believe. I think it was Shaw helping with the meetups. Really cool. This is what our community is all about. Cole, you're up next with, he's just going to give an intro to the database ideas, just coming out of doing well. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me all right? Sorry, I'm in the car. Awesome. Yeah, so C4C is kind of focusing this year on creating a database to kind of connect all the Cardano impact and environmental focused projects. And I've been helping Positive Blockchain, who kind of does it for all the different crypto ecosystems. And we're going to maybe be using a similar format and then also getting more exposure from those projects and putting them on the Positive Blockchain database as well. So that's there'll be more about it kind of coming up. I think we're going to have some more like sophisticated meetings about that, but yeah, that should be really exciting, and I'm getting really excited for that.
Thanks, Cole. Thanks for bringing that up. Cole just jumps in and does everything. And he's, just recovering from being ill. And it's like, yep, I'll present tomorrow. And it's like, oh, hang on a second, take a break, present next week. So Cole, just want to say big shout out to you and thank you for all that you do, and be well, take care of yourself.
Of course, happy to do it. Love helping the C4C community. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Cole. Peter, you can share the screens. We'll just buzz through these, and we're just right on time. Lawrence, you're going to be up at the top at the half hour, at the bottom of the hour. We've taken up a lot of time and energy on the budget. I've called it divvying up the tomatoes, just in a decentralized world, just to take away the stigma of paying people and setting values on human life and labor and passion and all these different things. So next slide, please. We've got into the community hubs. As you can see, we've got a spreadsheet. It's working really well. Daniel's not here today, but he's been helping me side by side with feedback from everybody else and setting this up to be pretty slick. We've been making some transactions. As you see, there's red. It means that we're just waiting for something in that. Very cool. Next slide. And this one's based on a plan where we come together with feedback and start figuring out how to divvy this up. Fund 7, we did not have good records. It just wasn't in the cards for us. So we're working with what we have, and we're figuring out how to do it as fair as possible. Next screen, please, or next slide. Community hubs, also Fund 7 on its way. A few more payments on that one to go. Next slide is into Fund 8, impact onboarding. And we've got some activity there. And thank you for Juanita and Boaz for jumping in and translating information in this. And that's something that I really look forward to seeing more of in the future. Next slide is going to be Fund 8 budget proposals, onboarding through events, community collaboration standards, and community hubs. This is something that Daniel and I are working on. We'll have something ready by the 7th of this month so that we can, real simple feedback form. We'll do that for about a week. And then by that time, we'll have some numbers finalized and we'll start paying out by, I believe, the 17th of March for the Fund 8, and that'll clear us all up. While we do this, we're also thinking about this in between funding time and also preparing for Fund 10 proposals. And yeah, really looking forward to it. It's quite a challenge. It's out of my comfort zone. Very happy to do it. Next slide, please. And I see Tyler's here as well. I'm really glad to see you, and maybe we can catch up a little bit after the meetup. But here's the schedule. So we're going to have another meeting. Daniel present at our Friday meeting. No, we're having a meeting with Andre and possibly Jem and a few others at 3 p.m. UTC on Friday. Everybody's welcome to that. It has to do with the budget. We're gathering our reflections on how we've come up with what we've come up with. March 7th, we'll have the feedback ready, 1 week of feedback, and start paying out by March 17th. Next slide, please. So if you're somebody who worked in C4C in 2022 and 2023, stay tuned. You can just click on that slide. Again, Peter, we are divvying up the tomatoes we have and planning for future harvests. Really looking forward to doing this with all of you. I believe we are co-creating something quite unique. And yeah, it's very good. So I guess I'm still on this. Newman would normally be here to cover us into the next slide, which is our new format for our Wednesday meetups. As you can see, we have introduction, miscellaneous updates for the first half hour, and then we go into a playground. In this case, it's a half-hour playground. We've just switched. And then 5 minutes at the end to check out. I will be hanging around at the end of the meeting if anybody wants to hang out for socializing. Next slide. All our meetings should be up to date on our Google Calendar. And if you just click on those links, yep, next slide is good. Last week we had Way of Counsel, and this week, next week, we hope to have Consens with Aaron Porath. He has a really great platform, and we just have to confirm that with Newman that he's doing that. I'm going to share a link in the chat. If you want to sign up and present, you're welcome to sign up and share. This week we have Lawrence, and I am going to hand it over to you. Do you want to share a screen? Anything?
Yeah, I've got a slide deck we'll go through. Thanks, Melanie. Thanks, everyone. Again, great updates from everyone, the videos from Peter and Cole's feedback. I think that sounds great. Getting linked into other blockchains for awareness is, I think, really a big plus. Okay, so let me go here and share my screen if I can. I'll share my desktop.
You should be able to share. Yep, good.
Yeah, I can. Can you guys see my desktop? Let me know if it's coming through.
Yes, it's coming through.
All right, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through smart contracts with Helios. So I wrote this book here, and what we're going to talk about today is just an agenda, because we've got a broad audience here. Just a real brief introduction of blockchain, so we're all clear on kind of where we came from collectively from a blockchain, and then why I'm talking about Helios, which is basically it's a language to write these smart contracts, basically to write these Plutus smart contracts. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about just the blockchain technology, so we're just kind of familiar with some of the kind of the core concepts like addresses, transactions, and Plutus smart contracts. And then we'll kind of close up with basically an example that shows Helios in action. And again, although this has been more targeted towards a dev and basically onboarding new devs, I think it's, there are people that are non-devs, you'll be able to see with this Helios code that it's actually pretty understandable. And that's, I think, pretty profound, because then allows, I'll call it the layman, the layperson, laywoman, to be able to look at this and see exactly, well, what kind of smart contract are we dealing with? So, and then just interrupt me if we've got any questions, and I'll be mindful of the time. So I'm not gonna go too fast, but I want to move through. Okay, so in 2009, we're all probably familiar, but Bitcoin basically started, and it ushered in a new era of trustless decentralization for digital currencies. Ethereum, it launched in 2015, And it introduced the concepts of rich programmability into a decentralized ledger technology. Cardano, it launched in 2017. And basically, it leverages Bitcoin's secure UTXO architecture and created a new deterministic and scalable and secure programmable blockchain. And so at the stage, basically, Cardano can be considered a third-generation blockchain, which builds upon both Bitcoin and Ethereum and aspires to be the world's financial operating system. So that's the history. Again, kind of the Coles Notes version, but you can see, relatively speaking, this is all relatively new. So now, why Helios? So Helios is a functional programming language, and it resembles a C-style programming, which is very easy to read and understand. Helios can be compiled on almost any target architecture that supports JavaScript. So this is great because you can actually compile compile into a Plutus script in a browser on the fly, or you can do it offline or on a mobile device. So it gives you lots of flexibility on where and when you compile your Plutus script. So then it can run and be submitted to the blockchain. I noticed a 50% performance improvement using Helios versus Haskell Plutus TX2, TXV2. And Haskell was kind of the first language used to write Plutus smart contracts. And there's a number of new, what I'll call them, alternative ways to write these smart contracts. And Helios is one of them, and I think it has tremendous amounts of benefits to it. Finally, Helios is also a transaction builder. So there's two parts when you're dealing with a smart contract. One is to create the smart contract, to code it. And the other is to actually construct the transaction off-chain that then gets sent to your wallet. And so you can actually submit a transaction and have it hopefully go through and execute and move the assets around. So this is very convenient that you're dealing with kind of a one-stop shop. You basically deal with Helios for building, as well as for actually writing the smart contract, and also for actually doing the off-chain construction. So the addresses themselves, and I apologize if I'm going too fast, but I do want to be mindful of time. Addresses in Cardano are really at the heart. Basically, every asset on Cardano needs to reside on an address. So that's kind of where first principles are. You got to understand addresses. And I'm going to go into a little detail here, not too much. But addresses, if you look into address, the key parts of them are what's called the spending key hash. And what this thing is this is what's called a public key. And if you can, basically you have what's called a private key. And to prove that you actually have that private key, you tell people, well, here's my public key, which is derived by the private key. So what this really means is that an address has to contain is derived from a public and private key. And then also there's a staking key, and that's how we basically stake our ADA. And that's obviously another very big fundamental part of Cardano. So these two things are really the most important. You don't generally need to go into the details here, but I want to raise that because there's going to be references to a public key hash. And that's what this thing is about. And again, it allows you, it's basically the sister of the private key. So you have your private key, you've created that, you don't share that with anyone. But if you want to, it's like an address, basically you want to broadcast, I have this private key, you actually share that to the world with your public key version. So, and again, there's a lot of details here on cryptography. I can't go into it all, but I'm trying to give you kind of a quick overview on some of the key building blocks that we'll be talking about. So transactions are used to transfer assets from one address to another. And those assets can be ADA, which is the Lovelace that we deal with. And there's a million Lovelace and one ADA. Or it can be these NFTs or other native assets. Every transaction must contain one or more inputs and one or more outputs. And a UTXO can only be spent if it is signed by the owner. And when you sign something, you're using your private key that we talked about. And I'm going to just show you an example here, a diagram that helps maybe bring it together. So we talked about the wallet address, the address. And again, what was key on that address was that it was derived by basically that public key, which you need to have the private key equivalent, and then the staking address. So what you see on the blockchain is you have an address, You have UTXOs. And in this example, we've got 10 ADA at one of our UTXOs. So then, as we've talked about, every transaction needs to have one or more inputs. So in this case, we'll have one input here from this UTXO. And then in this case, we're going to be spending 2 ADA to this wallet address over here. So that's going to be one of the outputs, and we're going to create another output to another wallet address. And the way that a transaction works is you have what's called a fee that goes to the network whenever time you do a transaction. So you take your 10 ADA, which was in one UTXO, we're going to create a new output for 2. We're going to pay the network its fee, and the change is going to go back to this other address. And this address may be the same or it could be different, but generally the change goes back to the person who originated the transaction. So that's basically how a transaction works. And again, we can only spend this UTXO here because we have this wallet address has the private key. And this is again a fundamental part of blockchain technology. So Plutus Scripts. So it's another aspect now. You've got a Plutus script can spend a UTXO locked at a script address. eUTXO, which you'll hear about, is basically the extended eUTXO model and enables the capability to add a datum value. And that's a persistent piece of information to a UTXO. And I'll show you that in a sec. Redeemers is another thing that is added to a transaction to help do conditional execution. Let me just show the diagram, help describe how this is working. So, so you've got the script address here, and basically you've got those UTXOs that are at that script address. And the only way you can spend these UTXOs at the script address is by having the script execute, and the script matches the script address. There's a relationship between the two. So we're going to try to spend this 10 ADA with this transaction. So we need to supply the script that relates to the script address. There's also this datum value we talked about, and that's just a piece of information that we can store on chain, and that provides information we can use during our smart contract if we need. So similar to the transaction that we discussed before, in this case, we have one input, which is this UTXO for 10 ADA plus the datum value. And then we execute the transaction, we bring in our Plutus script. We can also provide a redeemer, and that can provide just a condition. And a good example of that is like a vesting contract, where you'll have the same script come in, but you might have a condition of you want to claim because the deadline is passed, or maybe you want to cancel. So there'd be 2 different conditions you would use. So that's where redeemers are helpful, to create a condition that then the script can use. And then finally, we talk about the output. So we're going to basically, in this case, we're doing one output here of 8 ADA. And I'm not doing the transaction fee because it just to keep things simple. So we're going to, in this case, it's putting you can send a UTXO to either a wallet address or to a script address. An address is an address. It doesn't matter. You can't distinguish the two, generally speaking. But in this case, the script address is where we're going to send this to. And if it is a script address, it can only be unlocked by including a script in the transaction. The wallet is going to be, in this case, a user, so they're going to get 2 ADA. So you can, again, a transaction is going to send, in this case, 2 outputs, and in this case, it goes to a script address and a wallet address. So that's, again, gone rather quickly, and there's a bit to digest if this is the first time you're reviewing this, and we'll obviously have this recorded, and I'll include these slides. And this is kind of just a first step. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I wanted to give an overview to make sure we're all on the same page of how things are actually working on the blockchain. So now that we've done that, let me just stop there. Does anyone have any questions on this? Let me just open it up first to the floor. I know I've talked a lot. And if this makes sense, that's great. Okay.
I think we need to do an exam now.
You better have been paying attention. So anyway.
I'm also thinking you may need to chunk this up for us every now and then, right?
Yes.
Just because you're giving us this great overview, and if we really wanted to deep dive into some of this stuff, it'd be really amazing to have you back and to teach us
Sure.
different parts of this. It would be amazing.
Not a problem. I absolutely. And there is a lot of, exactly. We're dealing with a complex topic, so we're trying to just simplify it. And absolutely, but it's kind of the first pass, and hopefully you're.
So, I just have a really quick.
Yeah. Go ahead. There was a question.
Sorry, Hassan, I think I muted you by mistake.
No worries, that's fine. Yeah, so what's the difference? What's the use case with this versus the previous example you showed us?
Yeah, so a use case for this could be like a vesting contract, right? So a vesting contract is where someone, let's say they had some funds and they wanted to load it into a smart contract and then have a deadline. And so once a deadline has been reached, so a person like inheritance, right? The child could go ahead and claim that funds once the deadline is passed, or
Right.
if the person who donated it wanted to cancel it, then they could cancel it. So that would be an example of a use case here, right? And then the prior would simply be just transferring either NFTs or transferring ADA. You would just have a typical transaction.
And one interesting difference I see is that there's no transaction fee. Is that in the other one?
Yep.
There's no transaction fee. Is that because why is that?
So there's a transaction fee in here. I just didn't include it for simplicity. So there's always a transaction fee. Yeah.
Okay.
I just didn't include it.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So any other questions on this? And again, you feel free to message me, whatever you need to do if you've got other questions that we can't cover in here. Okay, and I'm just going to be mindful of the time, so I've got 15 minutes left. Okay, so we're going to go through an example here, and again, so if you're new to coding, this there's always, it's like a language, so there's going to be syntax, there's going to be vocabulary that you're not familiar with, but I'm going to just go through it, and you'll start to understand certain pieces of it. And that's kind of the point, that I think you'll start to understand stuff. And not that you're going to be a developer day one, but it is important to understand it. And then if you are a developer, then obviously it will be easier just to build and start building on this. So this is an example of basically a minting an NFT with Helios. And so if you're familiar with any programming, this is a very C-like syntax. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to explain the pieces here, just so you see how it goes, and we'll go from there. So what we're going to do with an NFT is we need a couple properties. We need it to be unique. So, and then we also want to make sure that it can't be minted again. So the way we do that is we leverage the properties of the blockchain, and we want to grab a UTXO. And we've talked about those UTXOs, right? We spend one of them when we execute a transaction. So what we're doing here is we're basically hard coding a UTXO, and this is what a UTXO, you use what's called a transaction ID. So in this case, our first line, we're just saying, okay, this is the UTXO we're going to want to spend in this particular transaction. And then we can create an object. This is how we create a variable and an object. So we're just representing this in Helios. And then we create, really, this is the ultimate output that we're interested in, which includes the transaction ID and 0, which is the index. So what this piece does here is it basically just hard codes. This is the UTXO we're going to want to spend when this minting transaction occurs. So that's what those 3 lines basically do. On line 7 is really the start of the actual Plutus script. And every Helios program has something called the main function. And it takes in a couple parameters. Right here, we're taking what's called a script context, which is basically just information about the transaction. You can also pass in, like that redeemer we talked about. You can also pass in the datum. So that's where you get some data that's associated with that UTXO. But in this case, I don't need that. I just need this, what's called the script context. So this is the function, and it returns a bool. So that's a Boolean value. And this is going to determine whether the transaction succeeds or fails. So when this function executes, it's going to say yes or no. And if it says yes, then the transaction will pass. And then our previous example, if we go back up here, right, if this transaction succeeds, then it will generate these outputs to, in this case, the script address and the wallet address. If it doesn't succeed, it won't work. And it stops and it says, no, I'm not going to do that. So then inside the function itself, again, we have to define a few variables. So there's one is this transaction. So we pull this from the script context. So that's, again, a TX type in Helios. We have to create a minting policy hash variable. And again, there's lots of terminology here, but what this is really about is it basically creates a hash, and it's what's like a digital signature of everything you see here. So it's this code. When you hash something, it gives you a certain signature, so you know that this code, only this code can create that hash. And what's an interesting property of this is that because we've hard-coded this UTXO in here, it makes sure that this hash is unique for whatever UTXO is in there. Okay, now the second part here is the asset class. And again, this is basically, we're creating the actual NFT we want to generate. So an asset class is comprised of a minting policy hash and a token name. So that's how we create this. And then the last thing we want to do is get the value that was minted as part of this transaction. Okay, so then after we have those 4 variables, we can now do our logic. And this is where it's pretty straightforward. We basically say the value that was minted in this transaction equals the asset class. So this is the NFT that we're creating, and a quantity of 1. So this is the first thing we want to make sure, that this NFT, there only exists 1 that's being minted. Okay, that's a good point. And then the second one is we want to look at the inputs in here and basically make sure what we're doing is we're checking to see that the inputs in this case match this UTXO that we've created here. So again, the syntax is going to be a little daunting if you've never seen that before. That's okay, you would get used to it. And you'll start to see a pattern that this is a common way of writing, how do you see if your inputs are there? How do you see if something's minted? So you'll start to see this again and again as you look through these NFTs examples. And that's basically the logic of the code right there. So it's got 20 some odd lines. It's not that complex. Obviously, this is a simple a smart contract, but the other contracts are not that much more advanced. It builds on these same building blocks. And as you start to get familiar with the language and the syntax, then it becomes pretty easy to understand what's going on. Again, some developer background is obviously very helpful. And this is, I think, a probably first step because this is, again, a lot of developers can get into this space with this. That's where I think there's a huge benefit. So let's go to an example of actually running it and seeing what it would take from a developer's perspective to actually and even a non-developer, to actually try that out. Because that's how you really learn, is by trying something and then actually testing it out. So let me just pull out here. And I'm going to go to dmeter run. And this is basically a great tool to allow you to just spin up an environment to start testing. So I'm going to see if they're there. So in your case, you would have to basically just sign up and then create an organization, but that doesn't take long at all. It's pretty straightforward. So we are doing this live, so you never know what can go wrong, but we'll try this. So I'm going to create a workspace. And what we're trying to do is just demo that exact code that we saw. So I'm going to clone a repository, and I basically have, let me just go here. Where's my, here, Helios examples. Okay, hold on 1 sec. Let me just go grab the examples. So this is basically a repository that I created, and it has a number of examples in it. And again, all in lines of just getting developers up and running quickly. And so we're going to go through this NFT, and that's the example we just looked at right now. So let me go over here. Okay. Just big one here. Okay. I just can't get access to this for a sec. All right, here we are. Move this over here. Okay, so I'm just going to copy our repository, TypeScript, small and pre-prod. And I'm going to go ahead and create the repository. And what I'm going to do is I'm following the steps here in my slide. So it's provisioning this thing. So let me just go back to here. Oh, it's really annoying. 1 sec. Okay, so the steps we're going through is we went to dmeter. We're now just going to clone the works of the examples that we have. So let me go back in here. And it's running, so it's provisioning this. That's exactly what we want. What we're going to be building is what's called a web app. So I'm actually just going to have to expose, I'm going to expose a port. So I'm just going to do this, port name. Okay, so Next.js. And this is just allow us to basically access this web application when we run it. Okay, so let's just see how we're doing here. Well, I'm just trying to get this up here. Okay, so basically that was in a lightning fast. So basically we have an environment that's now running. It's exactly what we want. We've exposed a port so we can actually access it. And so our next step is we're going to open what's called the Visual Studio Web. So let's do that right now. Okay, so we do that by selecting this here, open the web here. And I'm going to trust this. Yes, I am. Here we are. Okay. And I'll just increase the zoom so you can see what's going on here. And I've got this in instructions. So we're just going to open up what's called a terminal here. And I'm going to do a directory listing. And you can see these are the repo, these are the directories that we saw in the Helios example. And we're just going to go to the NFT example. And again, this is just a dev first time. Let's see if you can get up and running in Mint Zone NFT, right? So you just type our command nmp install, and that installs all of the libraries needed, and it doesn't take very long at all. Go back here. So we've done this. We moved to the NFT directory. We did the install, and then we're going to run the actual development server here. Okay, so then we do nm. So we've got that installed. That's great. We run dev, and there it is. It's running now. Okay, so that's great. And so I'm just going to put this down here. Actually, I'm going to do this so it's a little easier for me to keep doing this. Okay, so then I go to the URL that I expose the port, and we should see the application. And there it is. So now our Helios text transaction builder is there and it's running. And again, this is a bit more of a technical view, so we're going to just show the console, which is a way to just see some of the output. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to mint an NFT with the code that we walk through. So I have an Eternal wallet, so I'm going to be using that. So I've already got my user and I'm connected to this pre-prod network. So I'm going to use this guy to basically mint the NFT. So let's go back here. So I'm going to select Eternal, and it's going to prompt me, and yes, I need to connect, allow the wallet to connect to this web application. And again, this is a very minimal application. The idea here really is just to understand the concepts, and it's not for final production use by any stretch, but it definitely can give enough to understand what's going on. So actually, I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to get a receiving address. I'm going to go grab that, and then I'm going to go back to my application. And in this case, so I'll put in the address that we're going to want to send the NFT. I'm going to create an NFT called Mad Dog, crazy dog that loves its treats, and an image. And this is what's called an IPF image. And there's more information on how to create that, but it's just a global kind of distributed imaging system that you can use to point your NFT to. And then you press Mint NFT. And what this is going to do is this is going to build the transaction with the off-chain code, and then ask your wallet to sign the transaction, which is what we're going to do here. And then it's going to submit the transaction, and then it's submitted. And what we'll do next is we'll look at the actual code, the off-chain code, on how we built that transaction. And obviously you'll see, we'll also see the code as well. So basically this was how you would go to the actual C Explorer. Right now, I've noticed that there's some load testing in pre-prod, so I'm not seeing the transaction load, but this is what it looks like. I mean, it just takes a bit of time, takes about 10 minutes for it to show up. But this is what you would see is, again, it takes your inputs, as we talked about. So, there was basically these eUTXOs that we were dealing with, and then it generates an output. And in this case, you would create a NFT, which is what we've just created, plus the change. So let's go in and actually just look at the off-chain code on how you build that and how it kind of comes together. And again, this is a bit of a fire hose, but I thought it would just be really helpful just to kind of see all this in action. So let me go back to here. And this is basically the Visual Studio tool that we're using. And again, the whole premise here is to get devs up and running really quick. So I'm just going to open up that NFT example, and I'm going to go to basically index here. And this is a React application. So anyone familiar with that from a dev perspective will get up to speed real quick. I'm not going to go through it, but where I am going to go through is just the one function that we have written here. And this is the, basically the mint NFT. And so this is the function that creates what's called the off-chain code. And so if you recall, we had a bunch of parameters we passed in. We passed an address, the name of the NFT, description, and the image. So we take those, we construct some minimum values that we need to get from the wallet. So we go ahead and we call the wallet. And we say, okay, give us some UTXOs that has those minimum values. We figure out what the change address is. We can get that from the wallet. We figure out what the collateral is. And collateral is just something that's used to help prevent spam attacks on the network. So it's a UTXO that you generally will never spend, but you need to have it set aside in case there's a problem with the transaction. And then you start building your transaction. So we basically add our inputs that we had. And again, this all goes back to the diagram we talked about, right? So we're going to add in those the UTXOs that we're going to want to spend because we're going to need some money to not very much, but a little bit of ADA to mint this NFT. And then here, and this is where the magic is, this is actually this minting NFT code that we showed, right? We walked through, but in this case, it's actually put as a variable. And we actually compile it on the fly in the browser. And so what we do is, we got from the wallet UTXOs we needed. So we just put them right here, that value. So we just make sure, based on dynamically what UTXOs is available, we'll put it right into the minting script and then we can compile it. And I think that's so awesome to be able to do that because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So we go through, we basically compile it, we attach it to the transaction. We just need to construct what this NFT is going to look like and also add it to the transaction. So it's a minting transaction. And if you remember, that was one of the things that we looked at in this script. What's actually minted? Well, this is what we're creating off-chain. And so this is what the Plutus script is looking for. And then finally, we do an output. We basically say, okay, let's output that NFT to the destination. And then a few minor things left. We have to add the collateral, some network parameters, and then we attach the metadata. We saw that. Well, actually, we didn't see that, but that's there on chain as well. And then we are finally getting there. We basically what's called finalize the transaction. So we just need to balance it, figure out how much change would go back to the person, spending those UTXOs. We signed the transaction, and we saw that, right? The wallet came up, and I signed it. And then we submitted the transaction, and then it was success. So that's basically it in a nutshell of how to mint your own NFT. And as you can see from a developer, it took them less than 5 minutes to get an environment up and running, to be able to write code, and then they can start playing with this. They can, So again, this is one way of having the Helios code. It can be its own separate file, and you can load it on chain through different ways. So I would encourage you to check out my book because it does go through other examples that are definitely in different complexity. So that was the minting demo. Again, I've got reference links here. So I encourage you to check out Helios. It's got a GitHub. It's got great documentation, an active Discord. I'm there a lot. Twitter handle to find out what's going on. And then there's the book that I wrote. Again, has examples from simple to complex. This would be a simple example. And then there are some more complex ones. And then these are the examples we talked about. So I think I'm about over time. Again, I'm sure it was a fire hose, but I think it's important just to kind of get it out there that this is a new way of developing smart contracts. And I'm very optimistic about this. And as I've been chatting with Yoram earlier, I think it's a game changer because organizations and people can start feeling a bit more comfortable that the ramp up to learn smart contracts is reducing significantly. And I think that's a big benefit for the whole ecosystem.
So just a really quick question. So is Helios specific to Cardano, or is it like across like other chains as well?
It is specific to Cardano. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's what's
Lawrence,
called,
can you share the link to your slides?
I can. I've actually also, yeah, let me just grab that right now.
I've shared the links that you shared with us, the GitHub, the book, your YouTube channel, but this has more, so that'd be great.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to I'll put in the link to a kind of the consolidated view, so you don't need to see this presentation view, which has got a lot of extra spaces. Let me just grab that here. And while I'm doing that, does anyone else have any other questions? Let me see. Actually,
I'm glad we recorded this.
Yes.
Lawrence, because there'll be a lot of people that want to see this and go through it slower, and along with the reference material that you have. Yeah, I think my eyes glazed over at one point, just because that's a lot of information. And like you said, you do need to practice it in order for it to become part of what you do.
Yes, absolutely. You got it. So let's just do that here. I'll put a link. Hopefully you can access this one. I just made it available. I've shared it to everyone with the link, so it should work. Let me know, folks, if you can't get to it. Everyone's okay?
Link looks good. I see a
good
view
stuff.
only. Yeah.
All right. So I am kind of out of time, so I
Perfect.
don't know if I have any more time for questions, but please feel free to reach out to me if anyone does have any questions. I think Shaw had a quick question.
Yeah, for me, first of all, thank you very much. And again, I will also need to see it slowly again.
Yeah.
One thing that is really, really interesting, and I know you're doing a lot of that, to have also a link with use cases of how smart contracts are used for impact projects. And I think that's really great. And if we can have kind of show the use cases of smart contract and developers for impact projects like Buy Milk, Make an Impact, or Open Litter Map and others, I don't know if someone can take the hat and kind of start organizing that, but that I think will be massive for us. So yeah.
Yeah,
so
no,
that's we have a place where people can do it. Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Please,
no,
please,
definitely, I can definitely, for myself, I can definitely start putting that, and maybe I would put that into my GitHub repository, some of the use cases just that I'm seeing, because that was one of the other motivations for doing the book and the library, is the hardest thing is if there's no examples, you're really scratching your head. And so that's where I put the examples together, but I could definitely map it to different use cases that I'm aware of. And ideally, other people start contributing, so you have kind of additional projects and templates that people can use. So I definitely would.
Exactly, and that will be something really wonderful that I think we need to keep on promoting. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Even updates on this coming up, Lawrence. If you come up with other things, we can start updating the community on. Last week you had Lawrence at the playground. Here's some of the examples. That we asked for, how it relates to these projects. BAMNut one would be great.
Right, yes.
Right? And Littercoin, like Yoram said. So, yeah. Wow.
All right. Okay, yeah, it's exciting times. Again, this is a game changer. And these people, like Melanie and Worm, like they were with me a year ago when I was doing the open lottery, and it was a nightmare. Like it was so hard to program. It was, and I'm not an idiot. Like I'm not a genius either, but it was really hard. And but now, I'm seeing that feedback from people that I'm helping out, and that people that are trying this, they're just kind of blown away that, oh, actually, I'm able to do stuff. Cool.
Wow.
This is great, and in 2 weeks we are going to have Pratik presenting an incredible project about farmers in India. And Laurence, if you can come there and see how your techniques can help what they are doing, really incredible work, that will be very interesting. Really great project. So in 2 weeks, Pratik is presenting.
Okay, good stuff. Sounds great.
Beautiful. So just some logistics, Pratik. I just need to have a little summary on this, and we'll advertise it in our meetup, in our slide deck so in 2 weeks. Yeah, fabulous.
Perfect. And Bruno, great to see you here. Taylor, what's up? You said that you didn't come for a long time. How did it go? What's your feeling?
And then Pratik, I want to hear a little bit more before we go. And it's also the top of the hour. If anybody needs to buzz off to Project Catalyst, thank you for coming. We can either keep the recording going, or we just, let's keep it going for a little bit and then we'll shut it off. But thank you all for coming. This is really great. Lawrence, we will share your recording with others. The links to the slide deck should be fine to share in the description as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Yep.
Okay. So thank you. So now we're into our after the meetup socializing, and let's maybe shut off the recording, Yoram,
Yeah,
and then we can just share a little bit more.
let me do that. All right.
So
Yeah.
definitely
Thank
want
you,
to hear
everyone.
from Tyler. Definitely want to hear from Pratik. Tyler.
Hi. Yeah, well, I mean, that was amazing, Lawrence. I have to admit, this is a very busy time of day over at the farm, so I was only able to like half listen and not see. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a great resource and something to check out and pause and think about. And yeah, I don't know. It's just exciting to find out that a lot of the stuff that we thought was, you know, what we've dreamt up over the years is actually now becoming possible to pull off.
Yeah. Agreed. Yep. I'm with you. I think it's quite exciting. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not sure I closed the recording, so
The recording's still on. It's fine. Just so everybody's aware, it still is going. It's really easy to do. It's the 3 dots on the bottom corner there, and we would stop live stream. Pratik, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your project before we stop the live stream?
Okay. So the crux of it would be farmers who are primarily looking to increase their yield and look for a better market access. What we do is connect with landowners around them, finance the rental costs, cost of inputs, harvest like labors and everything, and make it all fractionalized so that community can invest in it and take returns from the community, like farmers, as a share of the crop, but not as a return of income. So let's say sometimes they would be making tremendous profits, sometimes they would be like losing a little like farmers does, but more of a win-win and lose-lose kind of situation. Not a traditional mortgage type, but participation.
We have a lot of broken systems, and I believe that we have the ability now to recreate something that is win-win, win-win for the environment, for people. Yeah, so much more. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Any questions?
No, actually more interested to go read about Lawrence's book and complex smart contract structures there, because honestly, it took me around a year to figure that out on the Ethereum machine. And now if I have some support for putting it on the Cardano system, it would be so much more helpful in terms of different aspects. Like, because I saw where, there was a minter role and a buyer role in Lawrence's smart contracts. But when we are getting into real world assets, there are multiple roles that we want to involve here for verification, evaluation, even for, banks and custodians and all sort of pieces. So having different roles and keeping different data sets for different aspects makes it really simple for folks to do it. Like, wouldn't want to dive much deeper into it because it gets complex afterwards.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I didn't even talk about like the benefits that's over like an Ethereum. Like it's and there's massive. Like it's just that your fees are minimal. Like to mint NFTs is a couple cents. Like and then the transaction costs again are a couple, maybe 10 cents or something like that. So your transaction costs are significantly reduced. It's way more secure because you're just dealing with local state. You deal with all your inputs and your outputs. You don't have to deal with the global state of an account, which is one of the bigger security. That's one of the biggest security threats. So it's secure, it's cheap, and basically I think it's easy to understand. And deterministic. So you know what your fees are every single time. You know exactly how much things are going to cost. So these things are just, again, they're a little underrated. I think obviously the people at IOG, clearly these guys are smart guys. They knew what was important, and these things are. And as people become aware and contrast how they did on Ethereum, they're going to go, this is, you got to be kidding me. Like anytime I'm at these meetups in Toronto, and I'm talking with Ethereum guys or whatever, I don't have their problems. I don't have these high fees I have to worry about. I don't have all that complexity. So I think anyway, we'll see. You need adoption, and it's gotten better. So it's not going to say not going to save the world in one day, but it's definitely a really nice step forward in my view. So.
Perfect, amazing. I'm going to open for the town hall. So I'm
Perfect.
closing the so thank you everyone listening. If you have more questions, you probably have everyone, just reach out to Lawrence and come and see the presentation of Pratik in 2 weeks.